That's a great question. I often, again, with my journalistic background, you didn't have a whole lot of leeway when you're quoting people. You're quoting them exactly how they've said something, and so if they have some slang or if they say "I'm gonna" rather than "going to," and you quote them directly. When you're making up dialogue, you kind of tap into that conversations that you've had in the past, so that you know that people do say "I'm gonna do this" rather than "I'm going to go to the store now." With my particular novel, because it was written, the time period that it was written in was about 150 years ago, people tended to speak more formally in those days, and so you can kind of fall into a trap where if you write too formally, then readers today can't relate to it, and it becomes stifling. So you want to try to find that balance. One thing that I found very interesting from my historical fiction novel that I was working on, there was a project that was done by the federal government in the early 1900s where they interviewed a bunch of former slaves who had been emancipated after the Civil War, and these were people who were getting on in years, and they wanted to kind of preserve that history. So they recorded them on, tape recordings, and then they released those recordings like in the 70s or so, remastered it, and I actually bought the collection of those interviews and tapes. So I listened to their stories, and I listened to their pattern of talking, and that really helped me a lot to create the dialogue within my book, because there was a certain pattern to even how slaves talked, whether they were in the deep South versus sort of the northern South, like in Maryland and places like that, to how they talked and the slang that they used. And it is important. You want to be able to weave a little bit of that in there so that it's believable to the reader, but you don't want to put in so much that it's heavy and that people don't understand what they're reading or what the person's trying to say. So you've got to kind of find that balance, and I think just tapping into actual recordings of people talking from a certain region, and if you're fortunate enough, like I was, to have that from that particular time period, it was just a valuable tool to help me draft that.